Hello. Last episode that I made in this series of videos, we looked at the first part of chapter 1 in the Tao Te Ching and why I translated it the way that I did. What we're going to do in this episode is we're going to look at the rest of chapter 1. Now, the first part of chapter 1, I translated it differently than the way most people do, although there's no certain way that most people do it. But when I say that I translate it differently, it's because I changed the cadence in order to communicate very clearly. Again, this is what I wrote. The way is the way. You cannot know the way through ordinary means. The way is a useful name, but no name can describe the way. If I had tried to keep the cadence, I probably would have translated it something like this. The way is the way, not the ordinary way. The name is a useful name, not the only name. So I just felt it was a little more clear to shift away from the cadence and put the words in the way I did. And as I mentioned last time, I do have two goals while translating the Tao. One is integrity, which is integrity to the message of Lao Tzu. And then two is communication, which is communication to the modern speaking person, modern English speaking person. So as a result, sometimes things got changed. What I'm going to do now is read all of chapter 1 to you from my translation of the Tao Te Ching. The second portion, again, as I mentioned, I didn't move away from the original cadence as much. And so we're not going to need to spend as much time today looking at the translation. We're going to spend more time looking at the meaning. But let me just read the entire chapter to you. By the way, I gave each chapter titles. Chapter 1, I titled The Way. The way is the way. You cannot know the way through ordinary means. The way is a useful name, but no name can describe the way. The nameless is the origin of the universe. The named is the source of myriad things. Therefore, remain free of desire to behold wonder. If you remain with desire, you will see separate things. These two are the same emergence, but they are known by different names. Their sameness is called mystery. It is the mystery of mysteries. It is the door to multiple wonders. So let's start looking at this and what it means. So the very first line of this second section of chapter 1, when I did the word-for-word translation, it was nameless, heaven and earth of begin. Of here is a possessive character. It's this particular character right here. It looks kind of like a Z in the American or the English alphabet. This means it's pointing to the thing before it. So it's really what it's saying is begin points to heaven and earth. What is beginning is heaven and earth. So it's pointing possessively back before it. So this is saying that the nameless, which is what I call the way, the nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. And you'll notice that I translated it. The nameless is the origin of the universe. And then it's saying have name, or that which has a name, or if you, that which has a name, 10,000 things of mother source. So again, pointing back, it's the mother or it's the source of the 10,000 things. So that which has a name is the mother or the source of the 10,000 things. And I said the named is the source of myriad things. So let's talk about what this means. It's just these two lines. So the nameless is the origin of the universe. We know that's referring to the way, right? The way is the origin or the source of the entire universe. The named, we could also call this the defined, is the source of myriad things or the source of 10,000 things. That means that there are two ways to look out at everything that we see here. One way of looking out is to see just the Tao, just the nameless. That's all that's here. The other way to look out is to say, oh, there's a cup, there's a pitcher, there's some knives, there's a picture on the wall, there's a person, right? There's a painting, right? When we give things names, we separate them and say there's something other than the Tao or other than the way. So that's all this is saying, is if we stick with the nameless, if we stick with the Tao, or if we stick with the way as all there is, that's all we see. When we start saying, but no, it's not the Tao, it's a cup. No, it's not the Tao, it's a person, right? Then we start seeing myriad things or 10,000 things, which of course is a symbol because there's way more than 10,000 things. The nameless is the origin of the universe. The named is the source of myriad things. Therefore, if we look at the word for word, always no desire in order to behold its wonderful. I translated that as, therefore, remain free of desire to behold wonder. Now, what does that mean? Remain free of desire to behold wonder. Well, clearly, wonder and the Tao or the way are synonymous here. In order to see the wonder of the way, you need to be free of desire. But what does this really mean? Well, this is one character I do want to look at with you. It's this fourth character here. Let's shift over to the dictionary. If we look at the dictionary and we see that character, notice the character can mean to wish for or to desire. And I translate it as desire, but I don't see a difference between desire or wish for. So another way of looking at this translation, another way it could have been translated as is, is, therefore, remain free of wishing to behold wonder. If you remain with wishing, you will see separate things. Okay, so what does that mean? Whether we use the desire or wishing, what does that mean? Well, I am going to look at the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament for a moment. I'm going to look at NTI Romans chapter 2. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament is, I'll talk about that at the end of the video. That way, those who know about it can, exit out of the video. But for now, let me turn to NTI Romans chapter 2, and let me just read a little bit from that. The second paragraph in NTI Romans chapter 2 says, imagine yourself with this idea, for this was the idea you had. What if nothing was as it is? And in fact, in NTI Romans chapter 3, it refers to this again. Let's see how it's not indented, so I can't find it as easily. Oh, here it is. It asks the question in a different way. What if everything was different than it is? So it's the same question worded two different ways. What if nothing was as it is? And what if everything was different than it is? So what NTI is pointing to when it brings up these questions as a curious thought, it's saying, again, all there is the Tao or the way, or in Christian terminology, we might call it God All there is God. But somewhere in the metaphysical mind or in metaphysical consciousness, a question arose, what if it was different? Right? What if it wasn't all God? And NTI Romans chapter 2 is teaching how we went through this process of judgment, or the Tao Te Ching might call it this process of defining, or this process of naming, in order to divide God into multiple things, so that it's not just God. It's not just the way. It's a world of form. It's a world of 10,000 things. NTI Romans chapter 2 says, all judgment is fantasy. And again, it defines judgment as decision. So we could also call this naming. All naming is fantasy. It spins fantasy. It's a way to explore. It's a game, a folly, and nothing more. It has no purpose and makes nothing real. That means that even though I may call this a book, it is still the Tao. It is still the way, right? All there is the Tao. All there is the way. All there is God. So it has no purpose and makes nothing real. It is a web of meaningless thoughts given only the power of fantasy and absolutely nothing more. So if we turn back to the translation of the Tao Te Ching, what this is saying is the named is the source of multiple things, or we could say judgment is the source of multiple things, or defining is the source of multiple things. We could even say deciding that it's something other than the Tao or something other than God, making that decision is the source of myriad things. And that's the desire that we need to be free of in order to behold wonder. We need to be free of the desire for this to be something other than God. We need to be free of the desire for this to be something different from the Tao. If we are free of the desire for it to be something else, something different, then we see the wonder of the way. But if we hold to the desire for this to be a book, right, this to be a cup, and especially this to be a person, then we see the myriad things. So the nameless is the origin of the universe. The named is the source of myriad things. Therefore, remain free of desire to behold wonder. If you remain with desire, with the wish for things to be something other than the Tao, if you remain with desire, you will see separate things. You will see the 10,000 things. You will see the myriad of things. Now, the next line, the word for word, these two referred to, so the two things we're talking about, which is the wonder and the separate things, these two referred to same rise. They rise up in the same way, but they just have different names. Or the way I translated that, these two are the same emergence, but they are known by different names. In other words, what this is saying is, well, saying the same thing that NTI said. NTI said, it called it judgment instead of desire or instead of naming. It says all judgment is fantasy. Judgment spins fantasy. Judgment is a way to explore. It is a game of folly and nothing more. It has no purpose and makes nothing real. Judgment is a web of meaningless thoughts given only the power of fantasy and absolutely nothing more. That's what this is really saying when it says these two are the same emergence. In other words, these two are the same arising, which is, we'll call it right now, the motion of the Tao. All there is the Tao. These two are the motion of the Tao because that's all there is. But because we've started naming, or because we desire to see something different than the Tao, they have different names. We now have Tao and world full of things. or we now have God and world full of things. But the truth is we don't. The truth is we don't. As NTI says, it's a web of meaningless thoughts, giving only the power of fantasy and absolutely nothing more. In other words, we don't actually have the Tao and a world full of things. The truth is, all there is the Tao. So only the name is different, right? Only what we call it is different. It says their sameness is called mystery. This isn't something that is going to be intellectually clear. Although if you practice the way, and I will give you practices in these videos, if you practice the way, you can come to know this in a way that isn't intellectual. I don't really know what to call it beyond intellectual. Intuitive, but intuitive doesn't feel exactly right. It's a seeing that exceeds the seeing of the conditioned brain. But this isn't something that you can see with the intellect. So the fact that there's multiple things, and yet in reality, there's only one thing, which we call the Tao, that's a mystery, right? That's a mystery that you need to move into. And in fact, that points back to the very top. We want to move into the mystery, which we can't know through ordinary means. So we're going to have to abandon our ordinary means in order to move into the mystery and see the wonder of the Tao, or the wonder of the way. So these two are the same emergence, but they are known by different names. Their sameness is called mystery. It is the mystery of mysteries. It is the door to multiple wonders. And again, this is the introductory chapter to the Tao Te Ching. So it's setting the stage. It's really telling us all there is the Tao. But when you start naming things, you see multiple things. When you have this wish for it to be something other than just the Tao, you see multiple things. If you can let go of that wish to see multiple things, you will see just the Tao, the wonder of the Tao, because that's the truth of what is here. In order to do that, you're going to have to abandon all of your ordinary ways of learning, all of your ordinary ways of believing, all of your ordinary ways of thinking. You're going to have to go in a way beyond the way you've been conditioned as a human. And so it appears to be a mystery, the mystery of mysteries. But really, it's the door to multiple wonders, the door to knowing the Tao. So what I'll do now is I'll just read chapter 1 from mine again in full. And then I want to read to you from another translation. I think it'll be fun each time when I finish a chapter to pick another translation to read from. But first, let's look at the Regina Akers translation. The way is the way. You cannot know the way through ordinary means. The way is a useful name, but no name can describe the way. The nameless is the origin of the universe. The named is the source of myriad things. Therefore, remain free of desire to behold wonder. If you remain with desire, you will see separate things. These two are the same emergence, but they are known by different names. Their sameness is called mystery. It is the mystery of mysteries. It is the door to multiple wonders. All right. The chapter 1 that I selected from another version of the Tao Te Ching to read to you is this one. It is a translation by Jonathan Starr. And just like in the first part of chapter 1, I kind of varied from the cadence in order to communicate what I thought was the meaning clearly. Jonathan also sometimes varies from the cadence a little bit, or varies from the strict translation a little bit, in order to have a very clear communication of what he saw in the Chinese characters. So in that way, some people might say that his version is more interpretive and less literal. And by the way, if you want a very literal translation of the Tao Te Ching, I think my favorite one is this one, which is by Derek Lin. Very, very literal. And sometimes I'm sure we'll probably look at it. It's one of my favorites. But sometimes the ones that are more interpretive are a little clearer. And in fact, you'll find that, I have 10 hard copies of the Tao Te Ching, and then still I looked at multiple that were online. No two are alike, right? So at some level, all translations of the Tao Te Ching are interpretive. But when you look at multiple copies, you can start to get a feel for the message of Lao Tzu. But let me read verse 1 in Jonathan Starr's version of the Tao Te Ching. A way that can be walked is not the way. A name that can be named is not the name. Tao is both named and nameless. So he's referring to it's the same emergence. He's just doing it kind of out of cadence. Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is the mother of all things. A man, this is the part that I really love about Jonathan Starr's translation. A man, oh, sorry, not a man, a mind. Forgive me. A mind free of thought, merged within itself, beholds the essence of Tao. A mind filled with thought, identified with its own perceptions, beholds the mere forms of this world. Tao and this world seem different, but in truth, they are one and the same. The only difference is in what we call them. How deep and mysterious is this unity? How profound, how great. It is the truth beyond the truth, the hidden within the hidden. It is the path to all wonder, the gate to the essence of everything. So let me just read this second part of verse 1, part that I really love the way he wrote it, and listen and hear how it's the same as what I saw in the Chinese characters and what I translated, even though, of course, I translated the words differently. You ready? A mind free of thought, right? So I called that desireless in my translation, but it could also be called a mind free of naming, a mind free of defining, a mind free of judgment, right? This is all thought. A mind free of thought, merged within itself, beholds the essence of Tao. A mind filled with thought, identified with its own perceptions, beholds the mere forms of this world. Tao and this world seem different, but in truth, they are one and the same. The only difference is in what we call them. How deep and mysterious is this unity? How profound, how great. It is the truth beyond the truth, the hidden within the hidden. It is the path to all wonder, the gate to the essence of everything. So if you want to practice the way, a good practice for chapter 1, I think, is simply to start noticing my mind is getting stuck on 2 practices right now, so maybe I'll give you 2 and let you pick an option. Is simply to start noticing how your mind names things. And as you notice how your mind names things, realize that everything named is learned. Realize that when you were born as an infant, you didn't know cup, book, etc. You can also contemplate that this is only a cup in English. Contemplate that in other languages it has different names. So is it really a cup at all? You know, contemplate that this is only called a book in English. In other languages, it has a different name. So is it actually a book, or is it something else? And just let your mind contemplate that. If you wanted to, you could maybe set down 5 or 10 or 15 minutes a day and allow yourself to kind of look around and very slowly contemplate that. Like, you know, okay, I see what I call a coffee pot. I call that a coffee pot. I didn't know that when I was born. Somewhere along the way, I learned that name. In Chinese, it's not called a coffee pot. In Spanish or French or, you know, Arabic, it's not called a coffee pot. Is it actually a coffee pot? And then just pause with that openness, right? Openness helps take us into the mystery. So just pause with that openness. So that's one game you can play, or one practice you can practice as you're practicing chapter 1. The second one, which arose in my mind, is that desire that things be different than they are. Right? NTI was talking about how at a metaphysical level, there was a desire in the metaphysical mind that things be different than they are, really meaning that instead of being all God or all Tao, it be different. Therefore, separation or myriad things are perceived instead of perceiving just God or just Tao. So that wish, that desire echoes in our head all the time, all the time. And we see it in more basic everyday ways. For example, we may wish that someone in our presence was different than they are right now, especially. We may wish I had said something different or said it in a different way than I did. We may wish that the weather was different than it is. We may wish that my body was different than it is. We may wish that the food that we're eating tastes a little different than it does. Watch for how often the echo of that wish for things to be different pops up in the mind. If you want to do both practices, what you could do is set aside time to set and contemplate the first practice, the naming, and it's not the same name in all languages. And is it actually that name? And then the wish, watching your mind for the wish to be different, that could be a practice that you walk around with, like just during the day, you just kind of stay alert and notice, I just wished that it wasn't so hot out. I wished it was different. I just wished that she didn't talk so much. I just wish that it was different. So you really could do both practices. And then another thing you might do is grab the Tao Te Ching, whether you have my translation or another, and maybe just read chapter 1 once or twice or 3 times a day while you're doing these practices. And all of this is going to bring chapter 1 in deeper. And then in my next episode, I will move into chapter 2. Now, for those of you who know what NTI is, feel free to stop the video now, because I'm just going to share what NTI is to those who don't know. So NTI, the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. When I was a beginning spiritual student, The first book I read and contemplated and practiced with was called A Course in Miracles. And I loved A Course in Miracles. But as I was reading A Course in Miracles, this question kept showing up in my mind that I might describe as something like, yeah, but how? Like I felt like I was getting a lot of theory, but there was something practical about how to live this that felt like it was missing for me. So what I did when I did A Course in Miracles is divided into 3 books. There's a text, a workbook for students, and a manual for teachers. I read both the text and the manual for teachers maybe twice in the first 13 and a half months. And I did the workbook lessons. It's 365 workbook lessons. So typically you could do it in a year, but I think I occasionally took a week off, or I may have repeated a couple of lessons. So it took me 13 and a half months. And when I finished A Course in Miracles, both reading the text and the manual for teachers twice and doing the workbook lessons once, I heard this inner voice that asked me to read the New Testament and let it interpret it for me. And I did that. And basically what would happen is I would read from the Bible, read the New Testament. Then I would clear my mind of what I read, clear my mind of any understanding I thought I had about what I read. And then this inner voice would just start this dictation. Some people call this channeling. And I wrote down what it was saying to me. And that's what NTI is. That's what NTI is. It's what I heard from within as an interpretation of the New Testament as I was reading the New Testament. This book is available. If you happen to be interested in it, this book is available. You can find it on Amazon. If you search for the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. We often call this NTI, by the way, which is just New Testament interpretation, NTI. There's a Kindle version, an audiobook version, and a paperback. They're all published by Awakening Together. So you could get any of these. Also, a good way to study NTI is by using a self-study program that I wrote, which is on awakening-together.org, the Awakening Together website. If you look at the menu bar, you'll be able to find where it says 500 days with NTI. And you'll notice the curriculum is divided into the first 100 days, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth 100 days. And you start with day 1, which is actually at the bottom of the page, and you just work your way up. This curriculum was designed to start on a Sunday, but if you're retired, that might not be as important, but it allows the biggest assignments to hit on the weekend instead of during the work week. Also, if you look at the website, you'll find down here where it says audios. This is audio discussions of the assignments, people who are currently going through it. So sometimes it's fun to listen to them and what insights they had as they go through this curriculum as well. But it is a self-study. It's something you do on your own, and it will help you to receive a lot of clarity and go into some deep spiritual practices without taking too much time every day, right? It only takes, I don't know, 30 minutes a day to do the sitting assignment. And then there's a walk around assignment, just like I just now gave you a walk around assignment for the Tao about watching when you're wishing for things to be different. So that's what NTI is, or that's what the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament is. And I'll put a link below this video for anybody who wants to go find that page in Amazon more easily so you can order it. And that's it for me today. See you on another day with chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching.